Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, die-in time is here. That's right. We're talking about The Crate from Creepshow on Kill by Kill. Well, greetings and salutations, Internet. It's your old pal, Patrick Hamilton, coming to you once again from the basement of Amberson Hall. This is the Kill by Kill podcast, where we are dedicated to celebrating the least discussed component of any horror film, the characters. And we're going to unpack the gory details of The Crate from 1982's Creepshow in the hopes that a janitor's untimely end is just the beginning of the jokes we might make at their expense. And as always, there's only one person I trust that if I inadvertently cause the deaths of two people, she'll clean up the crime scene without me having to ask her. The one, the only Gina Radcliffe. How are you doing today, Gina?
Sounds like your house is falling down around you, Patrick.
We are rebuilding the gate in front of the house, and a good last 3 months, there's been construction in the back of the house, and now there's construction in the front of the house, and it's never been a problem until this particular episode's recording. But that's where we find ourselves. So if you hear drilling, I'm not like building a birdhouse while podcasting, but we have to move forward. So my apologies to everyone and to you, Gina, as well.
I mean,
oh God.
You're making it worse by commenting on every time the guy makes a noise. I mean, maybe it's because I live in a city. I just expect noise in the background of everything at all times.
Right, yeah.
So I am not fazed by this at all.
Yeah, this is just I guess the quiet of suburbia and the fact that he chooses to drill every time I talk, so I won't be able to knock it out afterwards, I guess is what it comes down to. But, there are greater crimes, and we will discuss them. But first, I don't want to scare you, Gina, but we are not alone. That is right. We have a special guest, and you know him as a writer and the foremost expert on horror movie music and soundtracks from both of his editions of his book, Scored to Death, and now he has launched a Kickstarter to fund his documentary, Scored to Death, The Dark Art of the Scary Movie. The one, the only J. Blake Fichera. How are you doing today, Blake?
I'm okay. Thank you very much.
I'm so excited to have you here. This is a long time in the making. I love your love of horror movie soundtracks, and this is a very interesting one tied very much to the director, George A. Romero. What got you into horror movie soundtracks?
Well, I was always just kind of into film scores. Mm-hmm. I always say that, I grew up in a house where we had everything from, John Williams stuff in the record collection and Ennio Morricone to, it was the 80s, so Hall & Oates and Thriller and all that stuff. So it never really seemed like different to me to listen to soundtracks when I was growing up. Mm-hmm. And then when I was a teenager, mid-90s, my friends and I rented In the Mouth of Madness by John Carpenter.
Sure.
And that opening theme just rocked my socks off. And there was no looking back after that.
Sure. And so what is your experience with Creepshow? Like, what was the first time you happened to watch it?
I actually I didn't grow up with Romero movies. I grew up with loving John Carpenter, and so horror was around. I was into horror, but for some reason, George Romero's movies always just kind of eluded me. I didn't grow up with cable, and then when I visited my dad, who had my parents were separated or divorced, and when we rented movies, I guess he just wasn't renting George Romero movies. So I didn't really get into Romero until I was in college. I went to film school at SUNY Purchase, and my roommate there, who was also my co-host for Saturday Night Movie Sleepovers podcast, he was into Romero. And so he started kind of introducing me to George Romero's Dead films there. And then I saw Martin around that time, and I fell in love with that. And somewhere around then is when I saw Creepshow. And then I revisited Creepshow probably within the last 10 years or so. And I've grown very fond of both Romero and Creepshow since then.
I think it's a wonderful example of what he can do. I'm pretty much the same. Like I did see Night of the Living Dead because of its lack of copyright, every television UHF station could show it as much as they wanted. But Creepshow was my first, I think, actual like post Night of the Living Dead introduction to him because it played on cable, because it played on TNT and stuff like that. So but I also like did not I grew up in a household where my watching habits were severely under observation, so I couldn't just watch whatever I watched. This one I had to sneak in later in life. Okay, so let's get into specifically our fourth story in this collection, The Crate. It should be noted that most of the sequence was filmed on the campus of Carnegie Mellon University in Pennsylvania, and we first meet Mike the janitor, who is the change he wants to see, only he loses that change under the stairs. He's flipping a coin and loses it under the stairs. And I think personally, and Gina, back me up here if I'm right or if I'm wrong, but more stories should start with someone saying, fuck a diddle.
Well, I mean, that's a Stephen King special for you right there. I mean, one thing I always love about Stephen King, even his worst moments, he comes up with the most creative swear words you'll ever find in any literature.
He does have a way with swears. That's absolutely for sure. Mike is the first person to discover this strange crate that's hidden under the stairs, almost like it's a deadly Harry Potter. He immediately knows what to do, and that is call up his old friend, Dexter Stanley. He's the head of the zoology department at the college. But Dexter is at a party with Henry Northrop, his queer-coded friend. There's only one thing keeping them apart, aside from elite collegiate society in the early 80s, and that is one Wilma Northrop, or you can just call her Billy.
Everyone does.
Everyone does. Here's the thing I suppose we have to tackle before we get to the real story of The Crate, and that is its unique setup, because there are two ways to look at this friendship. And one is that Henry and Dexter are on the down low, and their chess matches are really opportunities for them to hook up or be themselves, be their queer selves. Or they're just two professors who have an actual friendship, and Dexter understands that Henry is legitimately what Billy claims he is, a child who can't do anything for himself, and he feels sorry for him. Either one kind of works, but another way I kind of looked at it this time I watched was that, is it possible that the Billy we see may not be her actual true nature? Maybe she's not that much of a drunk bore, but that's how Henry sees her, and therefore that is how we see her. Is that possible, Gina?
Yeah, I mean, I think that all of his interactions with her she seems so comically over the top, and I mean, and granted, it is supposed to be like a comic book, but yeah, I just can't see how this woman would continuously be invited to events carrying on the way she does if she actually acts like that, just constantly publicly emasculating her husband and you know, staggering around yelling at people. But no, I think that you're probably correct, and it is exaggerated because it's his perception of her.
It's like she's Bluto Blutarsky and chunky jewelry. It's a real wild look. I mean, Blake, what is your interpretation of Henry and Dexter's relationship?
Well, this time around, I don't know. I got the sense that, Henry probably has more than just friendship feelings for Dexter, but I got the feeling that maybe Dexter doesn't have the that requited love for Henry. I guess he does seem to be running around with students, and I guess that could be a beard, but it did seem Henry seems very into Dexter. And yes. Dexter seems like he's trying to back out of that relationship a little bit.
He is, but it seems very Billy driven. Like they almost have a conversation outside where Henry's like, so we're going to play chess. And Dexter's kind of like, well, I think we've had this conversation about like our relationship, and like, you need to deal with your other thing before we, take it to the next level or continue our, like Billy is what is the spanner in the mix here.
Yeah.
And
she's cock blocking, is what you're saying.
Yes. And it's very possible that Dexter is bi, and therefore he is, taking all comers. He is sleeping with co-eds on campus, and he's sleeping with Henry, and who knows else. And the other interpretation might be is that Henry is not necessarily lustful for Dexter himself, but Dexter's lifestyle. Dexter is single. Dexter can flirt with co-eds. Dexter can speed off from a faculty party without saying goodbye. He's fancy free. And Henry is chained to the social anchor that is Billy, or at least the version of her that we see here, and he cannot escape it. So maybe it's a fantasy of wanting to run away, not necessarily to be with Dexter, but to be Dexter.
Yeah, like a hero worship kind of thing.
Or,
just
goals.
Jealousy.
Hashtag goals is what Dexter is to Henry. I'm not sure. All of them are kind of valid. There's nothing invalid to it, and I think you can see it in all sorts of ways. It doesn't really all of them enrich the story. I don't think any of them take away. But Henry is the kind of person who he can't fucking do anything. Like you can have all sorts of opinions about Billy and her attitude towards life and how she interacts with other human beings, but her diagnosis of Henry, I think, is dead fucking on. Henry is a child who can't really operate without her because he's too timid to do fucking anything. He's just praying for one of those Stephen King patented hand of God moments that just releases him from all his responsibilities. And what I would love to know is what happens after this particular story. It would be very interesting to find out. But before we go too much farther, I think we would be remiss if we did not discuss the presence and career of the one and only Adrienne Barbeau here. Blake, what was your introduction to Adrienne Barbeau?
Oh, man. Probably Swamp Thing. But then, like I said, as I grew up, I fell in love with John Carpenter's movies pretty early. So, Escape from New York, Fog, all that stuff. And then, of course, I grew up on reruns. So
yeah,
Maude was also on frequently. Anybody who's interested in John Carpenter should read her autobiography, because it sheds like a really interesting light on Carpenter. Like, we see a side of John Carpenter through her eyes that like we just don't ever imagine, like a very lovey-dovey kind of guy. So I recommend, all the chapters about him are really interesting, in their relationship, which of course it covers, here, I think they were still married at this point.
Yeah, sure. And if I'm remembering correctly, I don't think they met until Someone's Watching Me. Gina, have you ever seen Someone's Watching Me?
I don't think so. That was Wes Craven that directed the one with Linda Blair and the witch.
No, it's Carpenter, actually.
Oh, okay. So I am thinking of the right one then, but a different movie.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I don't think I've seen
Linda
that
Blair.
One.
That's a Wes Craven movie, though.
Yeah, the one where Linda Blair is like a witch who's wants her girlfriend's boyfriend or something like that. That's another. That's one I've seen, but I have zero recollection of the details.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen it.
Yeah, Someone's Watching Me is a pretty decent thriller. I mean, would it qualify as an After Dark? I don't think so, because it's not much of an erotic, thriller. That being said, it is. Lauren Hutton is hot as hell in that movie. And Adrienne Barbeau plays her coworker at the news station she works at, and it's just very casually mentioned and not really central to who she is that Adrienne Barbeau's character is a lesbian. It's a facet of her human being that's mentioned, occasionally referenced in terms of her going out on dates with women or having previous girlfriends. But it's not like a coming out story or it comes into play with how she none of that. It's just it's a matter of fact thing. She happens to be this. And so I think it's kind of taken on a little bit of a mythos of it being very progressive in a lot of ways. And also it's the movie that Carpenter made right before Halloween. Like he walked off the set of Someone's Watching Me and onto the set of Halloween. And so he kind of carries with him the confidence of working with these union crews. And there's a level of craftsmanship to that TV movie that you don't get in most TV movies. It looks cool. It is a Hitchcock pastiche, but it works. The finale is really top notch. The only downfall of the whole thing is that the male lead, David Burney, is a sack of wet potatoes. He's all of those things. He's a sack of wet. That's what he is. He is a non-fucking presence.
That's one Meredith Baxter Burney's husband, right? They were like a couple. Yeah. I remember him being like in a lot of TV movies of the 80s and having like absolutely no presence whatsoever.
Yeah, he may have been a good husband to her, but wait, he was a shitty guy on screen. It just like nothing is happening there. I think my first introduction to her would probably have been Swamp Thing on home video. But I would quickly catch up to The Fog and Escape from New York and stuff like that. And she has one of those great voices. And I think she even ended up doing voice work for like Batman, the animated series. I think she played a character on there, but I can't remember which one. But what wonderful information I'm providing to everyone.
Maybe she was.
She did something somewhere. She played a character. Information delivered. But what she does here, I think, is give you a bit of her Broadway background, where she was a brassy gal on Broadway. She's a special kind of something in this motion picture, Blake.
That's kind of an understatement, I think.
I mean, it's a tough role to play, which is the person you're supposed to hate. But honestly, I think she's surrounded by dips. I think she's surrounded by, white bread. Like, of course she's going to stand out. These people suck. Like, she's the only person you want to hang out with at this party, to be honest.
Yeah, I want to know how she and Harold. I want to know how they got Henry. I want to know how they got together.
It's a blind date.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. I mean, but what's keeping them together? I mean, how much money could he possibly be making?
Not enough. I mean, one of her complaints at the end of this thing is you don't make enough money. But she does have hot and cold running access to alcohol in the house. So that's going for her. I mean, she has a kitchen snifter. Like, she has a alcohol rack specifically for her alcohol in the kitchen, Gina.
I mean, anybody can get booze. I mean, come on.
Right. But we have booze in this house, but we don't have it in every room of the house. Like, we have a dog, we have a child. You can't just have it out and about. But it's available to her 24/7. So that's the only advantage. Or she likes to dominate Henry. This is what she enjoys, even though what irritates her is what she's actually getting off on, which is bossing him around.
Yeah, he's just extremely passive.
When she leaves to go to her quote unquote classes, doesn't she indicate? She says like, "What would you do without me?" And then she indicates like the same, right? Like, well, I don't know what I'd do without you. So there appears to be, at least in that one line, some kind of connection.
Right.
between the two of them. Like she's fond of him, even though he seems to be worthless.
Yeah. Right. And I guess the other element here that should be noted before we get too deep into the plot is that, all of Creepshow has a very EC Comics skewering of class layered into this. Certainly a part of Romero's, films, and certainly layered into a lot of Stephen King stories. But it's inherent to a lot of EC Comics stories as well. How the rich can, they just feel like they can get away with literal murder. And the only thing that holds them in check is a supernatural element, which provides us with something these elites cannot buy their way out of: retribution and justice. And so Billy is out of place, but how much in this place would you want to be? It's not quite the laser focused classism exercise that the first story, Father's Day, or the last story is, but it's kind of layered in this was the kind of environment that King found himself in when he attended college and later taught as a professor at college. There seems to be, it's poking at something that he's touched at one point in time.
I didn't think I never considered that, but that makes a lot of sense. This is my favorite one, my favorite segment out of the 5, because I just think it's genuinely the scariest one. From certainly looking at in terms of when I saw it as a kid, like that final shot of like the eyes opening up in the water, of like that, I was like, okay, that's burned into my brain forever.
It's definitely the most complete. It's the story that takes its sweetest amount of time to tell. Like there's a more full story going on. Something to tide you over is very slight. It's evocative, but it's slight. Jordy Verrill is a blip in this movie in terms of like, it's not a very expansive story. You're pretty much in 2 locations. One of those locations serves as multiple locations. So, this is a very much more full environment to dig into. And I think it's a lot of fun. Like there's a lot to dig into. These characters are rich and interesting. I do wonder why Billy was edited to say etiquette crotch instead of cunt, but I assume that's an MPAA thing.
This is the only one, though, that was like a previously published story, right? Am I mistaken?
Weeds, which became The Lonesome Death of Jordy Verrill, was published in a magazine.
Oh, I see.
But it was never reprinted in any of King's short story collections, probably due to its reception within Creepshow. This is the one that kind of stands out as being the most easily accessible and previously viewed story that's being recreated within Creepshow.
Also, it cuts right to the chase too. I mean, it's not fooling around,
and it knows exactly what it wants to accomplish. And unlike some of the other stories where like there's one gag it's all leading up to, here there's several hits. There's layers to your interactions with the crate. And so it's both building suspense and there's multiple payoffs with the crate. There's a little bit more going on here. And I think the movie benefits as a result. As we mentioned earlier, Dexter and Henry have a weekly chess game. And if you didn't catch the way I phrased that, yes, I am putting those words in quotes. So regardless of whether Dexter is actually gay or bi, he's been cast as like this island that Henry uses as an escape from the turbulent seas of Billy, who at best is like either too cool for these stuffed shirts, or at worst is a mean drunk that you can walk away from at a party. And most people do. Like most people don't stick around for long conversations with Billy.
Because she looks like she would like dress you down from head to toe, just tell you everything is wrong with you in about 30 seconds.
And I think she understands what's wrong with most people within 30 seconds, and they don't have the wherewithal or spine to say the same to her, which would be pretty easy to do. But, it comes down to the fact that, as we mentioned, like, Henry's just unable to do anything. He won't speak up. He won't take action. He's afraid of Billy's wrath in his personal or professional life. He's unwilling to put any work towards building a kind of solution in place. He's ineffectual in capital letters.
Do you think he's always been that way, or is he just broken at this point?
I think it's probably always been a component of his personality. I think she revels in it. I think you're right in that there's some component that they vibe off of, where he's the hapless, can't do anything right, and she's the truth teller who lays it on the line every single time. But there are zero consequences for his constant getting everything wrong, because that's the dynamic they have. So, like, this is just going to, continue to happen until a boxed Yeti creature eats one of them, and which one we won't find out until the end of the story. But our old friend Mike the janitor has called Dexter, and he says, I found a crate that states it's from an 1834 Arctic expedition, and it's just hanging out underneath the stairs, and I think you should check it out. So this gets Dexter's attention, and he leaves the party. And we have a fantasy sequence here, and you can tell it's a fantasy sequence because all of a sudden the Creepshow lighting comes into play with the reds and the blues. And Henry has a fantasy where he shoots Billy straight in the forehead. And then in his mind, everyone claps for this. Like, thank you for releasing us from the plague that is Billy.
It's like the craziest Tumblr story of, I told off a Starbucks barista that I wanted black coffee, and everybody applauded me.
I was halfway into writing an entire bit where I was going to do an Am I the Asshole, where I told the story about I was at a party with my wife and she was drunkenly yelling at people. So I shot her in the forehead and everyone clapped. Am I the asshole?
Well, you think Romero, well, I mean, I guess Stephen King could still, I mean, if nowadays would Romero get Me Too'd for telling such a story, even if in a fantasy?
I mean, I think this is an element of King's storytelling that repeats over and over again. And certainly early on, there were a lot of husbands who were harangued by wrathful wives and ineffectual men. And then once he hits the late 80s and then early 90s, he flops into women who are caught in abusive relationships. And he comes at it from that perspective. He repeats a lot of these tropes. He finds and mines these relationships over and over and over again. And I'm very certain as to why he views The Shining, the original movie, as poorly as he does, because that story is essentially not his fantasy, but his worst nightmare of what he could be. And he indulges in that nightmare to an end. And then he gives that character an out where he sacrifices himself for his family. Whereas in the movie, that character does not sacrifice anything. He dies because he's overconfident and continues to follow footsteps until it leads to his icy cold death. Is that the only reason Stephen King hates it? No. And he has plenty of reason too. That's fine. Everyone can have a different interpretation of a movie. But I do feel like that is one of his most personal stories, and he just doesn't like people playing around with that particular story.
Put a lot of thought into this particular segment, didn't you?
That was extemporaneous. I mean,
you've given me a lot to think about with this. Because, like I said, I mean,
they're not all dick jokes, Gina.
Because I mostly, like I said, this is my favorite one, but mostly because when I was a kid, I thought it was genuinely scary, and I think it's still pretty nicely gory. I mean, the special effects ain't so great from a modern perspective, but I mean, it's still like a big dude, like, big furry glove scratching at someone's face. But,
but the scratches look fucking awesome.
I never really gave a whole lot of thought to the dynamics of the human characters, but I'm not saying, oh, you're making all this up off the top of your head. I'm just saying I never thought of it from that angle. So it's interesting.
It's just one of those things that kind of flows through this is, King is like often examining people in very dire emotional circumstances and what makes them vulnerable human beings. And Henry is absolutely vulnerable. But I think my interpretation most oftentimes when I've watched this is some sort of Kingian hand of God relieving Henry of this terrible burden. When in point of fact, like, it's a kind of a tragedy that the only time Henry can stand up for himself is in the murder of his wife. Like, it's like an incel instruction manual in a weird way. And I had trouble, squaring that particular philosophical circle. It's still, and I agree with you, the best segment in the entire movie, a movie I love.
And I also think from a modern perspective, it's easier to see the facets of what might be said here. Whereas I think when this came out, you were just supposed to be like, yeah, eat her up, monster.
Through adult eyes, it casts a different pallor. But like you mentioned this earlier, what kind of classes is Billy taking?
Sleeping with a younger man classes.
Anatomy.
Yes, exactly. There you go. Anatomy.
That dick down at the local bar. 101, 201. Because it's not... I think some part of me was like, oh, like she's taking a yoga class, but no one dresses in chunky jewelry to go take a yoga
come on.
She's
totally cuckolding him. Come on. You don't think they have that element of their, you don't think they have that element in their relationship? Please.
I wholeheartedly agree, Gina. But we also get a second fantasy sequence here, in which Henry tries to strangle Billy, which I find amusing because I think if Henry had actually attempted such a thing, she would have murderized him in 6 seconds flat.
Well, yeah, that's why he would never actually try it in real life.
Do you think there's anything nefarious that went on between involving the death of Dexter's wife?
Oh, you mean that might be the bond that they share as they've already covered up one murder?
And it has pushed inspired Henry to do the same. And that's what they're talking about at the end, where he's like, well, I didn't do anything. And he's like, well, I didn't do anything either.
I enjoy this theory. I enjoy this theory crafting session. It's certainly something that I will ponder upon. But let us return back to Mike and Dexter as they are in the basement of Amberson Hall, and they're going to try and pry open this box. And it doesn't take too long for Mike, once they get the nails up and they hammer open the locks, and Mike sees 2 glowing orbs inside the box and goes, oh, beautiful jewels. And of course, that's when he gets his hand bitten off by a giant Yeti creature who has been living, I don't know, hibernating inside this box. Let's talk about Mike's death first, and then we'll get to the Yeti, because they're 2 separate conversations. But Mike, have you ever seen eyes that have confused you for fucking jewels, Gina?
I was going to say, I don't know if maybe this is some sort of mind control trick that the
Sure.
Yeti creature is playing. But yeah, I nothing about these creatures' eyes in any way look like sparkling jewels, and I need to stick my hand in this box I just opened that I've never seen before.
We could open up it more, but let me just stick my hand straight up into it. And he gets his hand bitten off. Then he gets a little bit more of his arm bitten off. And then the creature just pulls the rest of his body up.
Oh, it's so horrible.
The crate.
it's so dragged out and horrible. And you got Dexter barely helps him. He just
Dexter's ineffectual.
He's just sort of sitting there making these like, I have indigestion faces.
He doesn't know how to help, but he also doesn't really attempt to help. It's a real strange mix of, I don't want to touch you because I don't want to die, but also I don't want to die, so I'll stand over here. He is not a hero in this particular feature. Now we're going to get to the Yeti creature. Whatever is in that box. He kind of looks like a Yeti. He's from the Arctic. Let's say he's a Yeti. Was he in hibernation inside the box? What are the biological functions of this creature existing inside of a box without any food, without any water, without any source of energy, and he just been sleepy sleeps until they unlock the box?
No legs, maybe, arguably.
Yeah. But listen, even if you don't have legs, you still need to have a snack every once in a while. This creature has been boxed up since 1834, and just one janitor is all it took to wake up this guy. Again, this is a movie. We don't have to have an answer here. It doesn't ruin anything. I just find it fascinating.
Well, I think the hibernation theory is a good one. It makes as good a sense as any.
So Dexter begins stage one of his personal banana town. And he runs into Charlie. Charlie is a grad student, who's very dedicated to his work and his in-pocket pencil holder and velour shirts, apparently. But when Dexter tells him, oh my God, Mike the janitor was eaten by a monster in a box, he's kind of like, come on, give me a fucking break.
I mean, who's the Mongoose would react in such
Gina,
a way?
if you were at work and someone said, you have to help me, there's a monster in a box in the other room, would you go, okay, you stay here, I'm going to go check out that monster in the box? Or would you call the campus fucking police?
I would assume that at best, like, I was going to go in there and people present me with a birthday cake, even though it was not my birthday.
It's just a furry Yeti on top of a sheet cake from the local supermarket, that sort of deal.
Exactly. Just, tearing out a big old chunk, eating it, then tearing a big old chunk out of me and eating that too.
It's just a sheet cake with giant claw marks running.
Exactly.
But Blake, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong. Like, he's like, the campus police won't be any help. Yeah, but you know what they'll be instead of you? Lunch. I throw the fucking campus police in the way. What allegiance do you have to them?
Also, they may be armed, and we don't know. There's no reason to believe that shooting it will not do anything.
At least it might dissuade it from eating you. Like, you at least establish, like, hey, this is a real problem. Call in people with bigger guns or whatever the fuck, a flamethrower even. But going, you know what, let's keep the campus police out of this, and I, the grad student, will start measuring fucking bite marks like I'm Hooper in Jaws. No. Call the authorities, you dipshit.
The scientist in him has taken over it by the time he sees the shoe.
Charlie, much to, he sees all the blood there. But in between this sequence of trying to plead, Dexter trying to plead with Charlie to call the campus police because he can't. I don't know why. But the creature has pushed his box back underneath the stairs. And Charlie's like, no, I'm going to grab this shoe. I'm going to grab this flashlight. And I'm going to figure it out. And he looks inside the box and it's empty. He's like, But it turns out that Yeti was playing possum, baby, because he was in another corner of the of the stairs. And he takes a giant fucking bite out of that dude's neck. And it's gnarly as shit.
Yeah, okay.
How many teeth does that Yeti have, Gina?
He's got like about 80 teeth. He's got like 80 teeth and about like 20 claws. Just on one hand.
Because when he rakes them, like it's at least 4 rakes across his face. Ugh. It's gnarly as shit.
Ugh. I'm thinking about it right now. Ugh.
So yeah, he takes a bite out of Charlie's neck. He claws his face and then feeds on him in the dark. And then Dexter's like, "I'm out. I'm out. There's only one place I can go. I can fall into the arms of my old friend Henry and tell the tale, all while still holding a bloody boot of Mike's, which is some level of evidence. Like if someone comes to you and goes, a monster ate two people I was hanging out with, you're kind of like, I don't know. That sounds a little bit far-fetched. But they're holding one of the dude's blood-covered, bite-covered boots. And that might lend credence to the fucking story.
I didn't do this. Here. Would someone who killed someone be carrying around their bloody shoe?
Did I take a bite out of this shoe? Doubtful. Have you seen me eat other shoes at parties? Yes, but that was a dare. So we've talked about this before, but as much as I admire Romero for many things, some of what he tries to do here with Dexter and Creepshow is push various characters past the point of sanity, where, here it's played very broad and it kind of flies and kind of doesn't, mostly because of the tone of Creepshow is more comedic. So I think I can't say that Fritz Weaver's portrayal here exactly nails it, but it brings me back to an issue that we've talked about before. And I just want to say it again because it's that time of year. Poltergeist just came out in 4K, but it demonstrates the singular ability of Tobe Hooper, who consistently was able to show people like lose their grip on sanity in real time. He shows it over and over and over again. People see shit that makes their mind snap.
Yeah.
Gone, baby.
Yeah, it's funny you should mention, I just rewatched The Funhouse tonight before we recorded, because it's part of Criterion's 80s horror collection. And the lead girl, Elizabeth Barrage, she kind of goes through it, and comes out of the funhouse, just kind of staggering around like she's just been in an explosion and all. And yeah, you're absolutely right.
I mean, it really sells that third act when she's caught in the gear house. And listen, we're going to cover the funhouse eventually. I think it's on the calendar for 2023, but it's one example of how Hooper is able to show people who just they were on this earth and then their mind left, and he's able to get people there and show how it happens. Like, that's how you know Poltergeist is a Tobe Hooper movie, because those characters lose their goddamn minds, and you can tell. Like, you feel the after effects, you feel it when it happens. And listen, Spielberg, I'm not going to, handicap the man. He can do a whole lot of things, but that's one of those things he doesn't quite pull off when he tries it sometimes. Hooper, that's a target he can hit over and over and over again. Whereas Fritz Weaver is kind of like, he's a Simpsons side character at a certain point here. You're kind of like, pull it together, buddy. Like, you got to choose a fucking lane. I think it works. I don't. It's
well, again, it's comic booky. Like, you don't want to have you don't want this to be too serious.
He's no Barbara from Night of the Living Dead, who just goes completely catatonic.
That is true. Yes. Barbara goes through a lot of things, and then she eventually, at a certain point, just goes, I've had enough, and walks into arms and tearing flesh. But you know what? She had a good run, and didn't we all? I just want to note, I can't say like I'm a Fritz Weaver super fan or anything. It just should be noted that he was in Day of the Dolphin, the movie with the best tagline ever written, which is unwittingly, he trained a dolphin to kill the president of the United States.
And he's not even the he. That's George C. Scott.
No, it's George C. Scott. He's friends with George C. Scott.
Aren't we all, though? Aren't we all?
Truly. Deep down. Oh boy. So let's get it back to Creepshow here. And so Henry hears this tale and the wheels start to turn for him. So he does what any friend would do in this circumstance. Drug your friend. Just knock him out. Write your wife a note. head back to the college to see the scene for yourself. Like, he hears this and goes, maybe I can get my wife to die this way. He's betting a lot. Like, I guess the worst thing that happens if Dexter isn't telling the truth is that Billy makes fun of him, but that shit was going to happen anyways. So Henry goes back to the school, and of course he finds the bloody remains and does what we would all do, clean up. And in the first example of him doing anything without being prompted by somebody else, he does this on his own. And of course, this cuts back and forth to Billy arriving back home, drunk from classes. And she reads this. The sequence of events here is fucking wild. She's like, Henry. And Henry's nowhere to be found. And so she finds this note, heads to the kitchen, and pours herself a glass of milk. And I'm like, you're drunk and you're drinking milk?
Imagine that. I'm just taking a sip and just immediately barfing into the sink right next to me if I do that.
Maybe I haven't done enough drinking, but I can't imagine at any point having gotten drunk throughout the day and into the evening and going, my nightcapper will be some milk. But wait, she's got a special secret, and that is she has a snifter of hooch that she adds to the glass of milk.
It's like but
it's not even a White Russian. It's just like bourbon and milk.
It's like the Pittsburgh Laverne instead of milk and Pepsi.
Oh my God. Well, we're not going to beat that. So let's move on.
Yeah.
I just
time to wrap it up.
Wrap it up. Listen. You know when you've reached the mountaintop because everything's downhill.
We have been bested.
So Henry's back at the school, and I have to say, linoleum is the best surface to clean up blood from. Like, how many other killers, Gina, have we talked about where they're so great at quick cleanups of murder scenes, and yet it takes Henry forever to get this done on the best surface ever to do it?
He's just kind of like really just taking a very chill pace to cleaning up this, like, I mean, you can't even call it a crime scene because technically a crime has not taken place. Right. But he's just like, swish, 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 swish. Like, he could not be more chill about cleaning up this mess.
That does bring to mind what a great Law and Order episode this would be if they were sent out to go capture this monster in a box, and in between all these things there's a bong bong and just what street corner they're on. They're talking to Mike's janitorial supervisor. He's like, hey, Mike, the janitor? Yeah, I've seen him around loading a truck. But Billy arrives on campus, and she's brought her open glass of spiked milk, Gina. She's been driving with it like a fucking boss.
in like a pre cup holder in a car era as well.
Like, there might not even be seatbelts in that station wagon. We don't. How is this? Like, she's just gripping it the entire time.
On the dash.
Kids, don't try that at home. On the dash, right next to a bobblehead hula.
Like, just like staggering in with spills down the front of her shirt. Just like, what happened to you?
Why do you smell like
a
dairy section in bourbon?
I was gonna say, why do you smell like sour milk?
I've been drinking. What do you want? So, just in the nick of time, Henry finishes cleaning up, and I'll be honest with you. Once he brings Billy down to the murder basement where people learn, he does a terrible job of holding back his murder plan. Like, he's like, oh, Dexter assaulted this girl and she's underneath the stairs and only you can talk her out of there. And she's like, what does she look like? He's like, oh. Stop. It's only because he's been such a numbnuts that she doesn't go, are you trying to murder me?
Well, also she's sort of like, oh yeah, this has happened before. She's just like she's not horrified by this. She's just like, oh yeah, that's Dexter. You're raping another co-ed, you know.
But finally, I'm in on the action.
Yeah, it's like, ooh, now I'll have some tea to spill after this, you know. I mean, and you know,
I can't wait to bring this up at a.
Yeah, next to the next faculty dinner, you know. I mean, but she just
her next class.
Yeah, exactly, her class. But yeah, she's just like, oh wow, is that right? Where both people would be like, oh my god, we should call the police or something.
Right. At no point does she ever say, let's get the authorities involved. She's like, oh, well, thank you for inviting me to us covering up a crime. I've been training my entire life to do this, been drinking all day. I'm in perfect shape to do this. He lures her to the, little Harry Potter bedroom where this crate monster lives. And of course, the crate monster does not erupt immediately when he smells, bourbon and milk. And so he's like, starts shaking
what is
her
that?
like a baby. Listen, I've been in this crate for over 100 years, and that is the worst thing I've smelled in a long time. So Henry starts shaking her up against the crate, asking it to wake up, wake up, wake up, which it does not do. And this gives Billy the opportunity she's, been waiting for a while. She just fires every bullet she's kept chambered for Henry. He's lazy. He's ineffectual. He's a terrible lover. He's bad at washing dishes. He doesn't earn enough money. He has 3-cornered hat-shaped hair. He doesn't mix alcohol with milk like a real man. But this rant is actually what wakes up the creature, and he quickly eats her alive. And Henry does not immediately celebrate. He almost pukes out a window like a real stone cold killer.
I mean, yeah, I do the same.
Yeah, I mean it's real gross to watch.
I remember this is the first time. This is the first time Henry has seen this monster at work.
Everyone else has gotten Dexter saw it twice. This is his first time watching a Yeti take chunks out of a person he knows and unalive them right in front of him. So he kind of recovers, and I guess he assumes, for whatever reason, like the Yeti has nested inside this box, so he's stayed inside there. And why wouldn't you? People keep bringing this guy meals, so he just takes a couple of locks, adds them to the chains that are already there, locks it up, and then manages to drag this motherfucker up a flight of stairs out to the station wagon that his wife drove there, and then take it to a quarry and dump it off a cliff. This is the most this guy has done for himself in a really long time. This is the sort of thing that I think if we sold it to a lot of young men, maybe you can become a man by murdering somebody, by offering it to a boxed Yeti and then take it to a cliff and drop it off. Who knows what kind of guy Henry becomes after this.
Yeah, I'm going to say it makes about as much sense as Tucker Carlson suggesting that men, lay out in the sun and tan their testicles to raise their testosterone level. I mean,
Yes, our nuts need more sun.
Get them on out there. Get them on out there, boys. Come on.
And when I think of the pinnacle of males, I think Tucker Carlson. Absolutely. What a focal point for all of us to lean towards. So Henry then tells Dexter what he's done, and in exchange for his silence, Henry makes Dexter commit to playing chess with him twice a week. So either he's getting laid twice a week, or they're just playing chess, and now they can do it twice a week because they don't have Billy lording it over them. I don't know. But Dexter asks, what if it gets out? And Henry goes, oh no, it was in a box. It probably drowned. And that with Henry's track record, he's fucking wrong as shit, because we cut immediately back to that box breaking apart, and the monster's like, hello everybody, I'm back.
That scared that shot scared little Gina so bad.
I can see that. I can totally see it. It's a hell of a sequence. It really, really is. Blake, any final thoughts on The Crate?
I feel like this, if you had missed the first episode of Alf, this would have been a good prequel.
He's a little puppet.
Dark. We'll call him Dark Elf.
The darkest Alf. Yes, and it's not just cats that should be afraid of him. Absolutely. Gina, any final thoughts on Dark Alf?
I love it. I love it. It's the best. It's the best sequence out of the 5 for me.
It also has the best music. I want to know.
Yeah, let's. I meant to ask you about this at the top because the music here is not really being done by somebody who did a ton of music outside of Romero, and at times like there's big sweeping orchestration going on here, and then sometimes it's a little bit of Casio noodling. Like, what is your take on the music of Creepshow?
Well, I mean, if anybody is interested in reading a lot about it, I interviewed John Harrison for my second book, and we talk a lot about this score as well as Day of the Dead. But in a nutshell, Romero was planning on doing what he had done with most of his previous movies, which was score it with a sound library, a music library.
Okay.
But when they started listening to the tracks from the library and seeing what they were shooting, and obviously Romero was working with, higher caliber of actor in terms of at the very least popularity than he had worked with before.
Right.
They decided that the fidelity of the studio tracks wasn't strong enough. Like, they just didn't sound good. The sound quality was bad. So John Harrison, who was working as his assistant director on this film, said, well, maybe I can fool around with them with my keyboards and stuff and make them sound better. But then that kind of led to John just starting to write cues and combining to kind of go in between those library tracks. So ultimately, Creepshow ends up being kind of a hybrid score of library tracks and John Harrison's mostly keyboard music, although he did write the theme song as well. Mm-hmm. But his theme for the Crate is by far my favorite of the film. The one thing I will say that I found interesting was that with Something to Tide You Over, there's like a dark version of like Camptown Races or something that's played.
I think all versions of Camptown Races are slightly dark.
And I think that's what it is. And I asked him why that, like, why do that? And he said it was because Leslie Nielsen would whistle it on the set all the time.
That sounds like a very Leslie Nielsen thing to do. Yeah. Okay. So, I'm down for that. Interesting. Well, you have that story and so much more in your books, and I can't wait for that documentary, but we'll get to that before or after, rather. We play Choose Your Own Death Venture, and that is where we decide of the deaths presented in this segment. If you were forced to die in one of those ways, well, which one would you choose and why? Up for bid, we have get shot straight in the head at a party, or get strangled by a tie, eaten by crate creature, hand first, eaten by crate creature, neck first, or eaten by crate creature, face first. And Blake, as our guest, I choose you to go first.
I would go for shot in the head, but not because of what you're probably thinking.
Because it's the sexiest death of all days.
One, sure, it's probably the quickest and the least painful. But it's also that if that wasn't a fantasy, like your death has probably like severely scarred everybody at that party. And you will never be forgotten.
Talk about it.
You'll never be forgotten.
You become campus legend from that moment on as the victim of Professor Henry when he shot you in the head. And you had all that beautiful chunky jewelry on too, which It looks great on Adrienne Barbeau. I mean, a napkin would look great on Adrienne Barbeau, but that's neither here nor there. Gina, what say you?
Oh, definitely shot in the head. I don't want any of those chomping deaths. They are very prolonged and look terrible.
I was going to force everyone to choose a chomping, but the one I'm going with is face, because it looks like Billy is gone pretty fast. She doesn't her brain be bye-bye at that point. Whereas like that hand first.
Yeah, she's probably, so pickled at this point that she doesn't even realize what's happening anyway.
She's wasted on milk and bourbon or milk and rye. God knows what that combination is. If it's rum, she's a criminal and she should go to jail, even if she's dead. That is wrong. You should go to jail inside of that Yeti's stomach. That's not okay. Don't do it. But that just about does it. Josh Hollis does all of our artwork, and Revenge Body does all of our music. Go to revengebodymemphis@bandcamp.com to get this theme and all our other remixes. Speaking of music, Blake, tell us all about where people can see and hear more from you.
Oh, well, you can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram @ScoredToDeath. You can pick up the books at Amazon, from other book retailers, or from me directly at scoredtodeath.com. And right now I'm in the process of trying to raise funds to make a Scored to Death documentary, which is
excellent.
What does say based on the books, but it's more like a different way for me to explore the topic of horror film music. And if you happen to be listening to this before November 1st, 2022, you can contribute or find out more information about that at Kickstarter. There's a lot of cool tiers, including a limited edition exclusive album that I'm also producing in conjunction with this, which is horror movie themes covered by an assortment of really awesome composers and artists, everyone from Alan Howarth, who worked with John Carpenter, to the band Voyager, Animal Morte, Steve Moore from the band Zombie, Wojciech Golczewski, Holly Amber Church, Richard Christie, the Blair Brothers. So they all donated their time and their recording tracks specifically for this to help raise money for the film. So it's, in that sense, the kind of the generosity and the support I'm getting from people is great. But if we don't raise the money, then I guess we're not releasing an album or a movie. So so it all goes to waste. All those poor musicians wasted their time.
Well, I hope that doesn't happen. I think anyone who's sampled your work in your books and read your stuff, I think knows your passion on this subject. And I think it's one of those subjects that hasn't received as much exposure as others. So I think it's definitely worth everyone's while. So they should check it out right now. Gina, where can people find you on these here internet?
I write about television and movies at thespool.net. I also have a newsletter in which I write about movies and television, but kind of more at length and more about older, underlooked films. That's Gina Watches Things at Substack. And I am on Twitter under Gina Does Things.
Do it today. People, check it out. Of course, you can find us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. And, come over to our Patreon where we're doing fun stuff that you should see and hear about. At the end of the month, I think we've got a fun commentary track for you to listen to that you're very much going to enjoy. Lots of fun exclusives over there for you to check out. Please rate and review us on the podcatcher of your choice. We very much enjoy it. And of course, next week, we will be wrapping up our coverage of Creepshow with the creepiest of all the stories. We've got a fun returning champion coming here to help us talk about it and close things up for Halloweenies. But until then, don't worry, folks. The body count will continue for myself, for Gina and Blake. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.